Multiple Pittsburgh Penguins trade updates. Could Rickard Rakell be on the move? What players should the Penguins be looking to trade before the deadline? And I also have a proposition that could solve the Penguins' goaltender problem, but it's ultimately going to be up to Kyle Dubas what happens to this team. Kyle Dubas revealed what type of players he is looking at bringing in for the Penguins to make this playoff push. It's very difficult for bubble teams to make a decision. Are you going to be buyers? Are you going to be sellers? Kyle Dubas has not hid the fact that he wants to be a buyer. He has players that he wants to bring in to make this team better and help the Penguins make one push to the playoffs with Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. The duty that he was sworn into when he became the GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins is to retool, not rebuild. So we have a lot to talk about on this episode of Penguins Digest. First and foremost, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We reached 100 subscribers, guys, so thank you so much for subscribing to Penguins Digest. Continue to hit that sub button down below, and we will provide the latest Pittsburgh Penguins news, rumors, content, and updates moving forward, as well as some analysis of the games. Right now, though, we're in between a back-to-back. We lost to Ottawa yesterday, so that is history. We're going to forget that game even happened, move on to today, and looking even further ahead into the future, which means trades. The trade deadline is in March, so we have about 2 months, a little bit under 2 months before Kyle Dubas cannot make any more moves to this roster. So there are a lot of players right now and a lot of teams that are on the bubble that are trying to make the decision if they are going to start trading guys away or keeping them. Some examples that come to mind: the New York Rangers, the Boston Bruins. But today, we're going to focus on the Pittsburgh Penguins. What are some players that they could look to move? What are some players they could look to acquire? We're going to get to that later in the video, but first, the first topic we have to cover is who should not be traded. Because if we're going to make trades, we have to know who is off the table. And the first guy that comes to mind as far as a player other teams would 1,000,000% be interested in is Rickard Rakell. But I strongly urge Kyle Dubas not to trade Rickard Rakell. And that is something that has been identified recently in some articles, that Rickard Rakell is not on the table, which is a good thing for the Penguins. He's their leading goal scorer with 21 goals this season. He's on pace to get close to 40, between 35 and 40 goals this year. So this is our new version of Jake Guentzel, a guy that we obviously have to play against today, a big-time goal scorer, playing on a line with Sidney Crosby. That's what Rickard Rakell has become for the Penguins. He only has a $5 million cap hit, so he's a very easy player to hold on to at this point in time. You can't trade your most valuable player just because it makes a little bit of sense to try to get the most out of your trade pieces. He is under team control for multiple seasons after this 2025 season, so he has to stay, especially at the cap hit at $5 million. I mean, he is a bargain right now for the Pens, probably the most valuable player as far as financial compensation as compared to actual production on the ice. Like, this guy is the real deal. Probably the one positive move that Ron Hextall made as the GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins before Dubas took over and had to basically hit the restart button on this team. But he has done a good job. A lot of players he's brought in have worked out, some have not, but we're going to talk about that. So who should not be traded? Obviously, the first guy that comes to mind is Rickard Rakell. Again, we talked about his production this season. He is the most productive player, especially since he got snubbed from the Swedish Four Nations face-off roster. He has been probably one of the best goal scorers in the National Hockey League. Playing on Sidney Crosby's line, they have so much chemistry. Russ, Rakell, and Crosby, as good of a line as we have had since Jake Guentzel was on the roster. So this is a really awesome line to watch. They have magic every single game. Sidney Crosby, the main facilitator, but Rickard Rakell, man, he has been a big-time beneficiary of playing on a line with Sid, and you're seeing him put up career numbers. So this guy cannot be traded. He has to stay. He is a guy that absolutely should not be moved at the deadline. I am all in on Rickard Rakell. We need to keep this guy on the roster. 31 years old, big-time goal scorer, and the skill is there. The skill is there. We have to have some skill players around Sid. You have to. So Rickard Rakell, though it might seem that he's a little bit expendable, you can't trade your leading goal scorer. You just can't. There's a lot of teams that would want him, but there's other options, and we'll get into those other options in just a minute. But really, Rickard Rakell is a guy I do not want to trade. Another guy I do not want to trade that fans have been throwing his name around pretty much ever since we acquired him is Erik Karlsson. And let me tell you why I don't want Erik Karlsson to be traded. It's not just because he's been playing his best hockey as of late as a Pittsburgh Penguin. He has taken steps up in the recent weeks as far as production. He's been one of the better players out there. Now, he's still had his moments. He turns the puck over a lot, but he's an offensive defenseman, right? It's a give and take with Erik Karlsson, but I'm seeing a lot more positive than negative lately. And here's a comment from Karlsson recently, a quote from the Swedish defenseman. Karlsson said, "I think a Stanley Cup is what we all want to accomplish. I have 0. Some guys here have 3. And I know they want to win just as badly as I do. So I think that's a question that's up in the air. There are some controllables and there are some that aren't. Right now, I'm just focused on trying to get into the playoffs for this year because I know if we have that opportunity, I think this team is well equipped to do more than we probably could in an 82-game season. And that's Erik Karlsson's honest take on things. He knows that this team is built for success in the postseason. They have the experience and they have the cups to back it up. Okay, these guys have been there, done that. So Erik Karlsson, the closest he ever got was playing against the Penguins in the Stanley Cup Finals with the San Jose Sharks. I happened to be in attendance for some of those games during that Stanley Cup Final in Pittsburgh. But Erik Karlsson has never won a Stanley Cup. He didn't get that opportunity in Ottawa because the Penguins took him out. He didn't get that opportunity in San Jose because the Penguins took him out. So Erik Karlsson finally is on a team with players that could actually win a Stanley Cup, and he knows that's why he wants to be in Pittsburgh. A guy that wants to be there, you're not going to tell him, oh, you can't be here. His mentality is right, and that's the first thing I look at in a player. Right now, Erik Karlsson's playing his best hockey as a Penguin, and he wants to be there. Those are the two things I look at. He wants to win, and he's going to do whatever he can to help the team win. So there's 4 reasons right there why Erik Karlsson has to stay, as well as he has a ridiculous cap hit that is going to be very difficult to move. Unless you're making a trade for like Elias Pettersson, which people are all in on. I'm not 100% all in on that. I'm not going to hate on it. If we find a way to do that, okay. But Erik Karlsson is probably not going anywhere. So that's something that could ease everybody's mind. Rickard Rakell, Erik Karlsson, probably not going anywhere for the Penguins. That's my assumption, but I'm telling you right now why they should not be traded. Not that they won't be traded. I don't put it past Kyle Dubas, but I think it would take a crazy offer that would blow him away to trade Rickard Rakell. Karlsson maybe a little bit less, but it's because of his cap hit. His value is not quite there. His age and his cap hit is going to really narrow down the potential suitors for Erik Karlsson. I can't name that many off the top of my head. So Rickard Rakell, on the other hand, $5 million cap hit. Yeah, he is a popular commodity on the trade block right now. And he's not on the trade block, but who should the Penguins trade? Who is on the trade block? We've heard the name Marcus Pettersson thrown around for so long. I made a whole video about it. Marcus Pettersson possibly being moved. Probably the most valuable defenseman on the trade block in the National Hockey League right now. So if the Penguins were to trade Marcus Pettersson, I'm not going to say no. If they want to trade Matt Grzelcyk, I'm not going to say no. We have plenty of left shot defensemen, so we can afford to get rid of one. But there's one guy that's been out of the lineup a lot lately since we started to get healthy. We got Karlsson back. We got Letang back. We got Owen Pickering back. So now you're starting to look at who is the odd man out in this 6-man rotation of defensemen. And if you look at how many left shot defensemen we have, the one guy that comes to mind and has come to mind for the last 2 seasons for me as a guy that I would love to move if the opportunity came up is Ryan Graves. Ryan Graves is a guy that just has not been good since he became a Penguin. He started to look maybe a little bit more comfortable earlier this season, not long ago, but now he is a healthy scratch again. So Ryan Graves is just not a guy that I really want on this team at this point. He's being paid way too much money to do nothing. And if we could somehow trade this guy, even if we don't get anything for him, just to free up some cap space to get somebody else in there, it would be a luxury. So just to free up that $4.5 million cap hit that Graves has, accumulated over this time, getting that free agent contract after putting up some decent numbers in New Jersey as a defensive defenseman. He just has not been the same player with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So you look at the line combinations, he is the odd man out right now as it stands. Marcus Pettersson's in there though. So if you trade Pettersson or Grzelcyk, then Ryan Graves bumps right back in. Would I like to keep him? No. I'm fine with trading a couple of those guys because we do need to fix our defense. Our defense has been a big problem. People are going to say goaltending is the main issue, and I would maybe sort of agree with that, 50-50. The other part is defense. We are able to score goals more often than not. Last game getting shut out was a fluke. Our offense is fine. I don't really think there's a huge need for anything crazy on offense. Maybe one, younger player, like a kind of player that Kyle Dubas wants to go and get, and I'll tell you a couple of names that come to mind in the very last segment of the show today. But right now, I just want to look at this defense defense and tell you that's probably the best defensive six-man group that we can come up with right now. And Ryan Graves is not a part of it. So he is therefore expendable. So I would like to see the Penguins try to get something for him. Kyle Dubas can make up for that terrible signing that he made and get Graves off the roster, free up cap space. And you look at the cap hit of Ryan Graves, it's actually insane. Ryan Graves is making $4.5 million to play for this team right now. And that is the probably worst contract I've ever seen, because this guy's probably not even worth $1.5 million. So if we could somehow get rid of him and free up that cap space and be able to bring in somebody else, you look at Pettersson's cap hit as well. He's going to be due a raise probably at the end of this year, but the salary cap in the NHL is going up. So that's a big reason why Rakell's contract is as valuable as it is right now as well. And my teams would probably give up a lot for him, but I would expect them to give up a lot for Pettersson as well. Defensive players are in demand right now, and I really do believe that the Vancouver Canucks are a team that could trade for Marcus Pettersson. And if they did trade for Pettersson, we could get a couple players that are about to be on my wish list that I'm going to show you guys in just a second, and maybe just improve this team altogether by trading one guy away, and maybe even get a draft pick out of it as well, because he is such a hot commodity right now. And I really do believe that he is one of the most valuable players on the market. And if you want a defenseman, especially a top 4 defenseman like Marcus Pettersson, you're going to give up, top dollar type stuff to get a guy like Marcus Pettersson, because you know what he brings to the table. He has proved it all season long, what he means to this Penguins team, and it would suck to lose him, but we do have the luxury of having all of these extra left shot defensemen like Owen Pickering, who can play on the first line. P.O. Joseph's been decent since we got him. He should be in the lineup every single day, and Matt Grizzly. So it's a possibility that we trade a left shot defenseman, and I'm fine with that. Number 1 at the top of that list is Ryan Graves, and if we can't trade Ryan Graves, I guess you're stuck with trading either Marcus Pettersson or Grizzly, because you're scared at that point that you don't get anything for Pettersson, and then you don't end up re-signing him anyways. The way that you can keep Pettersson is by trading Graves and using Graves' salary to give Pettersson that $2 million raise and keep him on this roster for the next 3 or 4 years. So he's still in his 20s, great player. So is Ryan Graves, 29 years old. So I feel like he's the best player that the Penguins could trade right now, get the most for, and not get the most for, it would be Pettersson, but just to free up that cap space to bring in somebody else and make those moves, those big splashes that we want Kyle Dubas to make, to be aggressive at this trade deadline and make the Penguins a playoff team. So that's the end of that segment. Here comes the last segment, and it's the most exciting segment, because this is the trade block wish list here on Penguins Digest. This is in honor of 100 subscribers. I already said that. You guys finally hit 100 subs. I've been asking for it. Let's go for 200 now. But right now, I'm rewarding you guys with this segment. It is a complete far out there stretch of the imagination wish list. And I'm not saying that it's that unreasonable either. I'm not being unreasonable. I am telling you the guys that I think the Penguins could bring in that would help this team right now. Are they Kyle Dubas guys? Some of them are. And I'll tell you what a Kyle Dubas guy is, because that's the first question that you're going to ask me. What is a Kyle Dubas guy? What kind of guy does Kyle Dubas like? Well, you can look no further than Philip Tomasino and Cody Glass, these young players that Kyle Dubas traded for to bring this youth to the lineup, inject that youth. Anthony Beauvillier was a great signing as well as far as youth is concerned. These guys have not proven themselves in the NHL as of yet, so they are prospects per se. Kyle Dubas is willing to go out there and get guys like this that are low risk, high reward type players, guys that could pay off both now and in the long run. And that is his specific goal for this team, is to make this team younger, to inject this lineup with youth and to make them faster, because we're trying to make up for having all of these grizzly veterans that have been around for almost 20 years. We need to inject some youth in this lineup. So that's what Kyle Dubas has tried to do. Tomasino worked out. He's obviously on IR right now, which gives Jesse Puljujarvi another crack at it. We'll see what he does in his opportunity. He's been okay the last few games. I'd like to see him again today before Malkin comes back, and then we have to shuffle the lines all over again. Is Kevin Hayes going to go somewhere? There are so many question marks surrounding this Penguins team. We'll have so much to talk about for the next 2 months about trades. I'm just putting you guys in that mindset right now, because now is when Kyle Dubas has to make that decision. Are we going to buy or are we going to sell? He already said, hey, I'm ready to buy. I'm ready to go out there and get these type of players that can help this team right now. So what are some examples of those type of players? Will be your next question. Well, The first player is the biggest name on my personal wish list, and it is not a player you would expect me to put on the wish list, but I mentioned him before in a Penguins Digest video. He is one of my favorite in the league at his position, and I'm not going to hold it off anymore. I'm just going to show you guys. Let's get into it. John Gibson. If you look at what the Anaheim Ducks have at goaltender with Dostal and Gibson, they have almost identical stats, and Gibson is 31 years old, which means they could just go with Dostal, knowing that they are not even really caring about a playoff spot right now. They're actually playing good hockey, but right now they're still rebuilding. They have a lot of young players, a lot of really solid young players that they're trying to build around and get this team in a prime position to succeed for the near future and then long term. They're still trying to figure out what they're going to do with a couple of their younger players that have been, question marks and very inconsistent players at the NHL level. So they have a lot of decisions to make, a ton of decisions to make. Trevor Zegras is the first guy that comes to mind. He's been so inconsistent. But John Gibson is consistent. He's the type of goalie that if the Penguins were able to get him, that would change everything. He's a Pittsburgh native, hometown kid. Bring that guy home. He's supposed to be a Penguin. I would love to see John Gibson in black and gold. He would be the perfect goaltender for the Pens. His cap hit is just a little bit more than Tristan Jarry. If you look at the cap space the Penguins have right now, it's not a lot, but it's enough that if they wanted to make a swap, they could trade Jarry, who's younger, for Gibson, who's more proven and more reliable, and the Penguins could make that trade. They could make that trade if they really wanted to. And then the Ducks, do you pay Tristan Jarry? That's the thing. I don't know that they'd want to pay Tristan Jarry $5.5 million. So I'm not sure, but John Gibson's the man. And if they're already paying him, $6.4 million, I think that they would gladly take Jarry's contract and we could get John Gibson. We might have to give up something else a little bit, but John Gibson would be the answer at goaltender. And that's what I talked about in the open. This is my proposition to fix our goaltending situation. Bring in John Gibson, the hometown kid. Here is a Kyle Dubas type player. I have two of them on this list. Trent Frederick. This guy is young, very affordable. He helps on both sides of the puck. He can be a great defensive player and he can chip in some goals. He's the perfect young forward that's a perfect blend, two-way player that can really help this team add some depth, third or fourth line type guy, the kind of guy that Kyle Dubas would go and get. The Bruins are on the edge right now of the bubble. Are they going to sell? Are they going to buy? We don't know. Earlier in the season, they were talking about trading Brad Marchand, their captain. So we don't know with the Bees. This is a little bit more out there as far as Frederick, but he's on the trade block currently, according to The Athletic. And so I pulled him and I'm like, you know what? Affordable cap hit, young player, two-way player. I think he's Kyle Dubas' type. So maybe we bring in Trent Frederick. Here's another one. Bowen Byram. And now this one's really interesting. This one might be a little bit more out there. The Sabres are definitely going to sell. Bowen Byram is very young. His potential that he flashed in Colorado, he could be a really good defenseman. Now, he's a less shot defenseman, so obviously in this trade, we'd be giving up, Pettersson or Grzelcyk or Graves, somebody in this trade to bring in Byram, because I'm mostly focused on right shot defenseman right now. But this is the only left shot defenseman I will mention because of the deal that you're getting with Bowen Byram. He is a blue chip prospect. Like, this guy could be a top line defenseman, right? So the Penguins trying to inject youth in the lineup, we're farther to look than Bo Byram. He's a restricted free agent for 2025, which means you have another year of control. And then you worry about extending him. You've put that off one more year, as opposed to Pettersson, who's going to be due this offseason. Byram's not due till the next offseason. RFA deal, he's not going to get as much as when he's an unrestricted free agent. So you don't have to give him a huge contract yet. You still have, control over him. And if someone else were to sign him in free agency, you're getting compensated for that. So that's why I really like Byram as a potential option, because of his youth and his potential. So I really like Bo Byram. I put him in the last video that I did about trades as well. So I'm really excited to see Bo Byram as a possible option for Kyle Dubas to go out there and make a big splash. This would be a huge splash for the Penguins and shake up our blue line quite a bit. Now, here's a player I've been talking about for a long time. Niles Höglander. This guy is an absolute stud. He is the perfect Kyle Dubas type player. Very young. He has a heck of a shot. I mean, this guy can score goals. So I would love to see a guy like Höglander brought in. I think he's a perfect fit for the Pens. He would be a perfect bottom six type guy. He could really help this team. And his asking price is not going to be anything crazy, because these last two players I'm about to show you are both Canucks. This could be a one trade. If we trade Marcus Pettersson to the Canucks, we could get Höglander, who is a very promising young player, hasn't hit his potential yet. We could see him really thrive in Pittsburgh, even if he is a first or second line guy. And we could also give Vincent Desharnais, a big, hulking, huge right shot defenseman that would be on our third line. I think he'd be a great shutdown defenseman. He's been a healthy scratch for the Canucks quite a bit this season. They don't show the faith in him that they really thought they were going to have when they signed him in free agency, but, you know, he was great in Edmonton. I liked watching the guy. I think he'd bring a lot to the Penguins, physicality-wise, something we desperately need, some size. Yeah, just a sure up defenseman there on that third line, and we need a right shot defenseman. So I could see a scenario where we trade, you know, Pettersson, we get Höglander and Desharnais. Hey, you never know. These are all hypotheticals, guys, so don't crucify me for it, but you can leave your comments in the comment section. I like feedback. I like to know what you guys are thinking. What do you want Kyle Dubas to do? What will he actually do? Obviously, the first move that happens, you're going to see us here on Penguins Digest bringing it to you, breaking news, as soon as Kyle Dubas pulls the trigger on one of these trades. But right now, let's go make a splash. You know, it doesn't have to be this week. It doesn't have to be next week, but the sooner the better. Fix this goaltending situation. John Gibson could be the solution. And then obviously bringing in a young player like Frederick or Höglander on offense would be really cool. Bowen Byram on defense maybe. And then a big hulking right shot defenseman, Desharnais, filling another hole for the Pens. Hey, we'll see what happens, and we'll obviously be here to cover it. So I'm excited to talk about the next move the Penguins make, but it's fun to at least look at the hypotheticals. What could happen, what should happen, what won't happen, what shouldn't happen. So thank you guys for watching this episode of Penguins Digest. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hopefully we can beat Tampa Bay today so that we have something nice to talk about tomorrow. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you on the next edition of Penguins Digest.